And rather than viewing any of this as a destination, I always tell people you should view this as a voyage, and your mindset changes everything.
Rise Up with Rise Growth Partners. Joe Duran and the Rise team share hard-won lessons from building top wealth management firms, showing you what it takes to create a lighthouse brand that inspires clients, attracts talent, and fuels growth.
Hi, Joe. Welcome back to Rise Up. Good to see you.
Hi, how are you, Jennifer?
Good.
Hey, I'm in a sweater for the first time in a while. We have had the most incredible winter and fall here. And today it actually feels like it might be winter at 58, which I'm sure the rest of the country is at like 18. So
yes, here in the Northeast, it's frozen tundra. So today we're going to talk about your latest article, which you based off of some McKinsey research that I think, pulled you in and got you interested. Tell us a little bit more about...
It's a continuation of this idea. The last article we did about complicated versus complex, we got lots of feedback on that article. And a lot of questions about, well, what do I do about it? I think there was a nice framework for people.
Yes.
And I think there's no question we're in a more complex time than ever. And wealth management industry itself is going through all kinds of evolutions. And so I thought this article, when I read it, which, by the way, was a McKinsey article. It's the basis for one of their books that they're releasing. It's written, the work was done by two senior partners, Kurt Stovink and Caroline DeVoyer, I think it is. I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but I'm sure if you Google, you'll find it. They did amazing work. They interviewed 200 of the fastest growing companies in most complex industries. So I thought that was interesting. And it's like technology companies, companies that are dealing with all kinds of evolutions in their industries, from the auto industry to social media. And they looked basically, what were the 7 traits? And we only talked about 6. We'll talk about in a second why. But what 7 traits were true for the CEOs? And I was thinking, well, these are traits that are important for leadership teams. And so I took their words and I obviously then compressed it into something I thought to be digestible for our industry and for these RIAs that want to grow in these very complex times, and apply them as to I'll call them the 6 principles you need to get right if you're going to be successful in a complex world.
Great. So let's dive into them.
Sure.
So the first one is a curiosity and learning mindset. Tell us more about that.
Well, I think there's a premium now to, and again, this is like a growth versus fixed mindset. I think for many years, our industry, the wealth industry, has gone through changes that lasted decades. We were in the business of selling securities literally for decades. Then we went into the transition to fees. That took decades. Then we went from doing investments only to really financial planning or wealth management. That's taken decades. But the evolutions are now coming quicker and faster. And so you were able to be okay with what I'll call a fixed mindset. We pick stocks, that's what we do. Or we pick value stocks, and that's what we do. So as niche as you wanted to be, you were probably going to be fine because the clients were very stable. They were not going to shop you around, and the industry around you was not evolving that much. There were the big wirehouses and maybe a few disruptive RIAs, but generally the industry wasn't changing a lot. The rate of change is faster. And so you need to really approach everything with a learning and growth mindset, or I call it as a discovery mindset, that you don't go in with certainty about who you are or what you are, other than your values and your principles. You have to have a mindset of curiosity. What's working? Why is it working? And most importantly, look at other industries and say, what's working there and does it apply to our industry? So the other thing that's happened is, as we become more democratized for information, we're going to have to be more nimble with how we think about things. So I think having that mindset of asking the right questions, being intellectually curious at all levels, but most especially at leadership levels, and actually listening to feedback is really important. And so I always like to say, as you know, Jennifer, I'm very much this way.
Yes.
Why? Is this the best way? Is it really? What about this? Just asking a lot of questions. And we come from an industry that's very often dominated by a very strong, charismatic leader,
Yes.
who then crams down their opinion, and they're far away from the actual ground often. And so, as the bigger you get, the more you want your whole leadership team to have this curiosity and learning mindset.
Yes, really important. And some of what you're talking about made me think of these cultures they've established, which are maybe a little rigid, but the second one is a culture of candor and open accountability.
This one is really important. I would say, as you know, we speak to hundreds of firms, mostly middle market RIAs with 3 billion to 15 billion in assets, and we speak to a lot of them. This is where the biggest blind spot is for most of them. It's they want it to be nice, they don't want it to be honest. And you can be both. It doesn't mean that you can't also be honest and still be a nice person. But most of them grew up with a very, what I'll call, collegial or familial relationship. And the businesses that win think of themselves more as a sports team than as a family. What do I mean by that? We're just in the playoffs here. If you're going to have a winning football team, you got to know who's doing well and who's not doing so well. You're going to know if your running game is good. They call it complementary football for a reason. That parts that you're not doing as well, you account for that in other areas and make up for it. In many of these firms, there's a discomfort with open facts. Our organic growth is X. We're losing assets of this much. This is why we're losing them. And reporting and holding people accountable. Who owns it and when's it going to be done by? What happens when we fall short? One of the things we do to account for this every quarter, as you know, Jennifer, is we look and we say, what's working, what's not, and what did we learn? What are our accomplishments? What were our shortfalls? And what were the lessons learned? And that informs what we're going to work on. And so if you're going to have a culture that is thriving and growing in a complex world, you have to constantly assess what are the results and are they working? Because again,
Right.
even if it's uncomfortable, it's never personal. It's about our collective success. We're either winning or we're not. And the reality is that can be very uncomfortable for a lot of these firms where it's more important that we're all nice and love each other than
Yes.
we're honest about our results.
With many employees and leadership teams having been together for 10, 15, 20 years, they're quite uncomfortable at times with that accountability piece. And that leads to the next one, which pulls together both those first 2 points, which is managing in a complex
Yeah, again,
world.
we talked a lot about this in my last article, so you're welcome to read that article. It's really understanding that when you're dealing with complexity, you do not know the end result. So you have to be very focused on inputs. It doesn't matter if you don't have accountability and candor. And if you do, you then need to say, okay, we have to control how many meetings we're having, how we interact with our clients, how we track and measure our closing rates. It's not the end result. If you're doing acquisitions, you don't know how many you're actually going to do, but you have to have all the measurable inputs. And that's what's true in a complex world. You have to reward work and inputs rather than outcomes and goals, because you can have a goal, but the reality is it's unlikely that you're going to deliver every year consistently because the results are unpredictable. You don't have a way of controlling what happens to the markets, and therefore you can't control your EBITDA. You can control what you spend, you can control how you measure and track results. So
Yeah.
it's just engineering
and going into 2026, as people, if they had those results, if they had that tracking and accountability, they would have much more insights as to where do we put our capital, resources,
Exactly.
energy in the new year. Okay, number 4, engineering productive discomfort.
This is really
tell the
important.
audience more about what that means.
I'm a huge believer in this, which is growth and evolving will always give you a pit in the belly of your stomach because you're leaving familiar ground. And so one of the things that's probably the most important thing I believe a management team has to do is to actually create structures that allow you to be uncomfortable in a productive way. In other words, of one simple exercise that is we like to do here at Rise and encourage our partner firms to do, which is how would you beat Rise growth? How would you beat our firm? What would you do different than we do it? And that's a very uncomfortable conversation. Sometimes it's, well, you'd have a less noisy and boisterous CEO than Joe Duran, whatever the things are. Put on the table what are the things that might be they're not, you might think they're assets, but what if they weren't? How does your strength actually become a weakness and get used against you? And I'll give you a concrete example of how it showed up for us. As you know, we're very actively known as people who have opinions and advice to help firms to grow. Early on in our voyage, people were saying, well, you don't want to take money from Rise because they tell you how to run your business. And you, Jennifer, brought that up very early on in your voyage. Say, Joe, you guys have a reputation as a firm that tells people what to do. And I'm like, well, that's not true. And I said, but we heard it, of course. And that's the important thing. You created an uncomfortable conversation. And we now, as a function of that, are constantly asking, how are we perceived? How do we have to address it to make sure it's correct? And that comfort with uncomfortable conversations, which you now know is a total part of our lives, is a very important part. But it can't just be from the CEO. It has to be okay for everyone to ask anybody, including the founder and CEO. And I hopefully you agree that there's no question anyone can ask me that I'm not willing to debate and ask. It's something I know I've changed. When I was younger, I liked being the right guy in the room. And now I realize there's only the right thing and I might not have it. So
yeah. And sometimes the debate is, I often say in those cases, well, is it one data point or is it 5 or is it 10? It's okay. You don't have to react to every single data point, but it's good to challenge yourself to think about, are we seeing a pattern here? Do we think there could be a pattern here that we need to address? Or do we let it go? So that's part of the discernment. Speaking of a team, the next one, number 5, is a team approach to problem solving.
Yeah, this is a big one too, actually. And it really marks the evolution of your business. If you've gone from a lifestyle legacy business to a real business, is how many people are involved in the decision making. You don't want to be crippled. But if everything goes to the person at the top, you're creating the bottleneck, which is always at the top of the bottle. If people are not empowered to make decisions and choices in your absence, if everything comes to a screeching halt when you go on vacation for 2 weeks, you do not have a team. You have one superstar with a bunch of supporting players. And I believe that is one of the biggest dysfunctions we have in our industry. It's a very big, charismatic leader industry, and they tend to take all the oxygen in the room. They like being the one who answers to everything and being responsible. It creates a limit to your exponential growth. One of the things that I take great pride in is the idea that, hey, I don't have to be there for us to make the right decision. And that's only true if you create the framework that says, this is how we make decisions here. As you know, I'm a huge believer in checklists. And so whenever any group of people from Rise gets together, more than 2 or 3 of them, there's going to be a checklist that says, this is what success looks like. This is our process. And then you trust that you've got the right people in the room making decisions and that they know when to bring in more people or other people to help make that choice. So I have no doubt everyone that works with me knows when I need to be in the room and when I don't. And I don't need to be there that often. And that is a mark to the success of our franchise, more so than my needing to be in every single call. And I think that's true for most RIAs. They're very accustomed to everyone leaning on somebody. They run an aristocracy rather than a meritocracy.
Yes.
And that can actually make it very hard to attract great people and to keep them. Because most of the great leaders you're going to have, they want to have agency toward certain decisions.
And it's quite a burden when they get to that certain level. As we know, to get to the next level, they can't answer all the questions, be the decision maker all the time. And they start feeling that burden. But if they spend 10, 15 years operating in a certain way, it's very hard to make that.
I do a very simple thing. I have a very simple rule. If I'm losing sleep over it, then I have the wrong person in the seat. And I always tell everyone who works with me, your job is to lose sleep over this thing. That way I don't have to, because I know you, like, I know when it comes to marketing and branding, you're going to lose all the sleep in the world to make
I
sure
lose a
you get
lot
the
of
right
sleep.
message. But I don't have to then. I'm like, well, Jennifer's smart enough and she'll bring me in if there's something I need to worry
Right.
about. So
Yeah.
the reality is that's true in every area of our business. And we try to do that with the partners we have to teach them, like, look, if you're a great leader, you should be actually spending your time helping to maintain standards and ensure that your vision is being executed. It is not about doing the work. It's about making sure the team does the work and everyone is bringing their best selves to getting that problem solved in the most efficient way.
Absolutely. And that leads to number 6, which is very related, which is leadership, legacy, and succession. Unless you develop those people, how could you have good succession?
Look, my motto for decades has been my job is to help brilliant people do brilliant work. And that means that I have to constantly create an environment where individuals have the ability to shine and understand how things happen and ensure that my presence is not required for this business to be successful in what it does. And we had the same mindset building United Capital. I probably did not have enough of that when we were building what was Centura and is now Asset Mark. I was a younger guy, much too insecure to actually needed to be the center of the world. That changes as you grow and evolve. It's really important that you invest in the next set of leaders because they actually, strange as this sounds, fundamentally improve the valuation of your business because there is an inverse relation between the dependence of the founder and the value of the underlying equity. So one of the things we share with all of our partner firms is, look, ultimately this has to be a team-based firm because the team is what's going to increase the value for everyone. If you have too much key dependency on any one person, the valuation goes down because the risk goes up. And the higher the risk, the lower the multiple. And so you want to create an environment where everybody is able to understand how the whole business works. And that does force a level of radical transparency. Everyone knows what the financials are. Everyone knows how you set bonuses. Everyone knows how you establish budgets. It's a much more transparent way of operating. It puts much less responsibility on any one person. It also trains everyone onto how to build a lasting franchise, which is really an imperative if you're going to have a great business.
Absolutely. And unfortunately, I'm sure this happened to you in your career too, Joe. Like sometimes bad things happen to individuals completely unanticipated. So if you don't have that succession planning and that leadership team ready, it could be debilitating, not just in the long term, but in the short term, just to keep things running.
Yeah, and again, we've written a nice article on this, but I'm just going to frame the 6 traits and ask yourself these 6 questions of your management team. And we actually did this, as you know, with all of our partner firms and with ourselves to force rank every one of our teams on a scale of 1 to 10, how they think we're doing. Here's some 6 questions. Do you learn faster than you compete? In other words, do you spend time learning how the marketplace is evolving and what you're doing well or poorly on an active and ongoing basis? Number 2, can you listen to and hear the hard truths without consequence or fear? In other words, you have an environment where you can share the thing that nobody wants to say in a polite way and be okay that you're not going to get in trouble or get your head chopped off. Third, how do you make decisions? Do you make them with complete information or incomplete information? And how do you get comfortable with those choices? 4, do you welcome structured discomfort? Do you have a recurring way where you question and challenge yourselves the way you operate? Obvious one, do you solve problems as a team or as an individual? When there's a hard problem to solve, do you just go to one person or do you collectively work as a team to solve it and then bring in one of the decision makers to help? And then are you building leaders or are you simply leading? So it's your team actually learning how to do what you do with the information necessary. Those are some of the kinds of questions you want to ask yourself to just say, are we a business that's built to thrive in a complex world?
And They have to be honest when they answer the questions. And ideally, it's not just the CEO, it's the leadership team.
Yeah, it's everybody on the team. Yeah.
Well, this was great, Joe. Thanks so much.
You bet.
What would you like to leave firms with before we go today?
Just that this is an exciting time. And rather than viewing any of this as a destination, I always tell people you should view this as a voyage. And your mindset changes everything. And I think we often, because we have really alpha minded human beings, think of this as a race with a finish point. And actually, I think that's the wrong mindset. You have to view this as an ever evolving game, a never ending game, and view it with the same sense of discovery and exploration that you would have when if you're a land in a new city for the first time and you've never been to Paris and you just come with an open mind and a mindset of discovery. So the most important thing I could say in these complex times is your mindset matters. And don't go in saying, oh, the food is not the same as at home. Go in and say, wow, people love this. Why do they love it? And have that mindset of curiosity and discovery, because that's what will change everything around you and in your team if that's how you explore it.
I love it. Curiosity and wonder. Great advice. We will link Joe's article and encourage you all to let us know, what do you want to hear us talk about in 2026? Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Jennifer. Have a great day.
You too.